Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elise Rosemary, and I'm a Senior Vice President here at ACAM. And today we will be talking about how to manage an emergency situation when it comes to property management. Joining us today, we have a wonderful team of panelists, starting with Alexis Kamenov Fritz, rather. Alexis is the Director of Operations and a partner at Strongwater Group Services. Her background in property management helps her to assist managers, shareholders, and tenants navigate through the often complex processing and insurance claims and repairs. Alexis and her team have many years of experience providing emergency service, remediation, and reconstruction services to properties that have suffered an insurance-related loss. Thank you for joining us, Alexis. We also have the infamous Philip Christine, who unfortunately we're not able to see his face currently, but hopefully we'll be able to shortly. He's handling an emergency. No, I'm kidding. Philip is the Assistant Vice President and Supervisor in the Claims Department at Hub International. Philip's specialty is dealing with claims involving condos and co-ops, which help him to assist managers navigate through the insurance claim process, which can be difficult at times, I'm sure you can imagine. Philip has been in the insurance industry for over 25 years. So that's fantastic. Matt Resnick is the Director of Project Management here at ACAM. Matt and his team of experienced project managers represent the board, and they bring their leadership and distinct expertise to each job, ensuring that all project needs are assessed and proper procedures are followed from conception to completion. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have Brian Forrestal, who is a Senior Project Manager with PMG, Project Management Group, which is a division of ACAM. He oversees large capital improvement projects, and in the event of emergency situations, he deals with the operational coordination to ensure that the immediate rectification of any crisis might be handled when it arises. Thank you all. So let's get started, shall we? All right, so a little bit about what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to have what to do when an emergency occurs. We will have Alexis speak to insurance and remediation, as well as our other colleague, Philip, mold and asbestos abatement, reconstruction, and then we will do a Q&A. And as usual, we of course invite you to, throughout the process, put in your questions into the question box. We'll get back to you at the end. And if you're not able to attend to your question during this, or you think of something after, please let us know. All of our information will be at the end. Thank you so much, and let's get started.
Great, thank you, Elise. So, the purpose of today is to really run from when an emergency occurs to closeout. So the first thing, obviously, life safety is most important. We want to make sure that everyone is okay and accounted for, in your building. Once you determine that there are no life safety issues, we now need to deal with the problem, whether it's flood or fire. We need to remediate the situation. And while doing that, and as you're getting the situation under control, we need to start thinking about the insurance process and the cleanup and repairs ahead.
Yeah. Types of issues that you deal with regularly. So, what do you do with insurance?
So, and Phil DeChristine, the Assistant Vice President of Hub, can speak to that best. So, Phil?
I think you're on mute, Philip. Oh, well, maybe one of you in the meantime, while he's getting himself fixed, we can solve that emergency.
Yes. So it's important to know when to report a claim, what should be reported, and what's going to happen from there. So we recommend, and all of our ACAM resident managers, unfortunately, go through these types of situations, some bigger than others, but there's an incident report that should be completed. And this is really once the situation is under control and all your residents and the board understand what's happened and what the process is what the immediate process is to take care of the situation. So when a situation arises, using a fire and flood as an example again, you're only supposed to do emergency temporary repairs. We want to take lots of photos of the damaged areas. And if we're swapping out pipe or valves or whatever it might be, we want to keep that broken item around as part of the insurance investigation And then again, no permanent repairs should be made. This includes, closing walls, closing ceilings, putting painting walls, and really just any finish application. So if we go to the next slide, we can show what a typical property loss incident report looks like. We want to be as detailed as possible here, which will help with our claim. And I should also make note that individuals are going to want to actually put their homeowner's insurance carrier on notice as well for a claim. And we'll get into more of the details of that shortly.
Right. I think Philip is now joined. So Philip, do you have any other comments that you'd like to make about this process from your standpoint?
Yes, as far as what to report, any and all incidents that could lead to a claim. That's even if it's something it seems like it's nothing serious, a minor flooring damage, minor fire. At your first assessment, it might not seem to be that much or too serious, but we've seen cases where damages have shown themselves over a period of time, and we've seen minor incidents turn into big claims. So when in doubt, always have the claim reported. That's fine. It's important to notify the carrier or report everything. If you're not sure, is that your policy is a contract. Now, in that contract, there's certain terms and conditions. One of those terms is that you need to report any and all incidents that could lead to a claim, not that you are aware of a claim at that time. Failure to do so is a breach of that contract, and the carrier can deny coverage to you. So, like I said, it's always better to have the matter reported if you're not sure.
And a good real life example of this is really with leaks, right? So when there's a major water event, water always finds a way out, right? And we might not necessarily know where that is. And so we tend to see this sort of thing where you think you might have a small leak. Well, 3 days later, it might affect an additional apartment. There could be some mold and further remediation concerns, which we'll also get to later in the presentation. But Phil's absolutely right. Big or small, never hurts to put the carrier on notice just for what might become.
Right.
It's also, I might just add that documentation, which they're alluding to, is very important. So imaging, as was discussed earlier, and also just making sure that if any sort of work is done in relation to the incident that might have occurred, invoicing or proposals, all that should be, neatly kept in order and provided to your insurance carrier or to the building so that that can be shared for reimbursement or for coverage. So documentation.
And it's also,
oh, sorry. I was just going to say that I want to make sure everyone knows that we do offer emergency services at ACAM in case, I'm sure everyone who's attended do know that, but that is part of this. So you'll always have us as an umbrella, but sorry, keep going.
Yeah, and so when this event does occur, there are three types of ways about handling the claim.
Okay.
So you can obtain proposals and submit them to the carrier. You can hire a public adjuster, but they tend to charge a fee. And Phil, what is HUB's position towards hiring adjusters?
Well, we advise against it. As you just said, you hire a PA, they automatically take 10, 15% of the settlement. You have a claim for $100,000, they get 15,000 of it right there. And we find too that public adjusters, they do pretty much what we can do at HUB. They'll deal directly with the property manager, advise them what they need to have the claim submitted, documents, leases, estimates. The public adjuster, they'll negotiate with the carrier, with the adjuster to try to get the best settlement, which we can do here. And I've had some interesting calls with public adjusters. A couple of months ago, I was on the phone with a PA, pretty substantial loss. And in the middle of the conversation, he is asking, oh, can I get him some additional work, like on other claims? And it was like I was kind of taken aback by that, which left not a good feeling with me. So there are several reasons why it's better to not use a PA. Like I said, that's our recommendation. Yeah, the other way would be, as far as mentioned, to obtain estimates. You have a small water damage, some flooring damage, that would be the way to go. But then sometimes you have substantial losses, major fire, major apartments affected. That's when it would be best to use a remediation company and have a proceeds contract put into place that instead of getting estimates for every apartment in the building, you have a loss with 20 apartments, the proceeds contract, builder will be able to write up an estimate for you of the whole loss and damage and negotiate with the insurance company. So that's my kind of take on that as far as how to go forward with the claim.
And at this time, we would like Alexis Fritz to explain what exactly a proceeds contract is, why is it useful, and why is it both ACAM and our carrier's preferred method.
Sure, thanks, Matt. So a proceeds contract is actually directly between the property, so the condo or co-op, or the owner and the contractor. So in this case, it would be Strongwater Group. The contract enables us to do all the building responsible repairs. So later we'll get into improvements and betterments, but the actual proceeds includes all the agreed upon amounts by the insurance company. It's useful to the building because the best part is the building only has to pay the deductible to the carrier. They don't have any other out-of-pocket costs. It's our job, so Strongwater directly negotiates on the building's behalf for the settlement amount. So guess what? If we don't get enough and we still have to do repairs, that's our problem. And we have to take care of them. Also, sorry, was there a question? Okay.
Well, I think, Alexis, actually, that's probably a good place to stop for just a moment. So yeah. just to use a real life situation of it. For example, if you have a wall that's been damaged, Alexis and via the Strongwater Group might say, this costs $5 per square foot to fix. But if the carrier only comes back with $4 per square foot, well, Alexis and the Strongwater Group are going to do that repair for just the $4 per square foot. So it's a really good this is a really good application to see why we like insurance proceeds contracts, because it shows no matter what, the work will get done, regardless of the agreed upon price.
Correct. As far as what work gets done under the proceeds, it depends on your offering plan, and condos and co-ops differ greatly. So it's important to check, and each manager should be very familiar with what's covered under a loss in order to know.
Alexis, if I could just cut
Sure.
you off for a second. What you had discussed as far as what's considered to be covered under the policy, that would have to be looked under. There's a clause, a fire and casualty clause. Now, that describes what would be covered in the event of a loss. Just in general, typically would be all original walls, floors, original fixtures that were put into the building, items that the building's insurance policy would not respond to are any type of improvements and betterments that the unit owners do, any of their personal property, anything that they have added to their apartment. So just to give you a general idea, when you want to know, right, what's the covered item, what the insurance company would respond to, that clause would give you the detail on that.
And that's something the day of, when there's an emergency, that's something that our team would help you through the process of trying to understand these, because we have a thorough understanding of what's a betterment and an improvement and betterment to the building. And if you have, let's just say, some hi-hats that aren't original to the building, we can tell you right from, like, we can ask the right questions and get you to the point where you know, oh, these are the types of things I do need to document and get to my insurance carrier so the proper coverage can be made from my end of the insurance, as opposed to what will be covered by the building's insurance.
Yep, and just another good opportunity to remind everyone, which is why it's so important to also put your personal homeowner's insurance or renter's policy on notice at the same time.
And the other thing, yes, improvements and betterments aren't covered under the proceeds contract. However, since our company has a policy, since we're already working in the building, in your apartment, if there is an improvement and betterment that you would like restored, or you think this is the time to, hey, my apartment's already destroyed, let's do some upgrades. We're happy to help you with that and price that out for you, but that would be a separate cash contract between the shareholder directly and the company. So
yeah, can you tell us a little bit about what your company does?
Sure. So we've been talking about fire, floods, leak, pipe bursts, really any unforeseen emergency, hurricanes. We come in and we do everything from the emergency service work through the remediation to the reconstruction. So that's all covered under a proceeds contract. We're available 24 hours a day. We get a lot of calls 2 a.m., 3 a.m. That just happens to be when emergencies happen. Someone will answer and someone will be there. Upon arrival, we do have an agreement on an iPad that has to be signed by the manager or the on-site superintendent or resident manager, just saying that you're permitting us to do this emergency work. That's provided to the building's insurance carrier to go towards the proceeds contract.
And just to add to that a little bit, it's very important that there's immediate response. Like Alexis is saying, 24-hour service is very important in these types of situations, because the longer an incident goes on for, the longer there could be an issue that could really grow beyond what it could potentially be contained to. So the 24-hour service is the key point there. So just
yes. We like the call, like when the water's still running. That's the best time to get the call. So basically when we come in, we like to start from the source of the water downward, because if you're in a high rise, you know, the water is going to go where it flows down. So we start up, and then by the time we get down, we're hoping that we're able to find the last source of water. Again, sometimes water shows up 24, 48 hours after, even a little longer. We like to make sure that we're drying out the excessive moisture immediately, or smoke odors, because the longer you wait, like Brian said, especially for drying, you're going to cause way more problems for yourself regarding molds and asbestos abatement, especially depending the age of the building. Some equipment that we use to get the air circulating and promote drying. We have water pumps and shop vacs, which are clear. They're for getting the water out of a place that it shouldn't be. We use industrial quality fans and dehumidifiers. It's important that the apartment's kept at a good temperature to sustain fast drying and promote the healthier cleaning of the apartment. Most of us, we need during the summer especially, is to reduce the humidity. The amount of machines that you need in an apartment is based upon square footage, as well as the amount of water that comes into the site.
Can I ask why the age matters for the building?
Sure. So your floors could have asbestos in it. So that's often what we're seeing. We actually have a few losses right now where that's the case. And unfortunately, if you hadn't changed your floors and you still have the original floors, a lot of times that does test positive for asbestos.
Not good. So it sounds like you have, though, things that you do, speaking to mold and asbestos. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So the point is to try to avoid it, right? We try to avoid it. We try to get in there as fast as possible. You call us. We don't say, yeah, we'll be there in the morning. No, we say we'll be there within an hour. So once the area, if we do notice something, our guys are very good at noticing, and ladies are very good at noticing whether a floor is a certain age and has a possibility for asbestos, or if the water is just not drying after 2 to 3 days, and even we've poked holes in it, we've done everything we can, then we call in a third party to test. So also, I want to remind you that if you do call in a third party to test, these prices are also included under the proceeds contract and negotiated directly with the carrier. So it's our job to put those costs into the carrier and get them approved for payment. All the work is scheduled for mold, asbestos, everything through the management company. And we have a architect on staff who files the necessary DOB paperwork. It's important that we start the process, especially for buildings that are in certain areas or have certain types of window damage from fires, that we start the DOB filing process sooner rather than later, because lately, like everything with COVID, the DOB is a little behind.
Got it. And then as far as reconstruction, how do you handle that?
So again, this is included in the proceeds. The most important part that I find out from a manager is you'll usually hear from me the day of the claim, and I immediately ask, please let me know the carrier and the insurance adjuster assigned. And what we do is we create a walkthrough with your resident manager, your superintendent, with the building's carrier's adjuster. And the reason we do that is because it's so much easier to come to a settlement when you're at the site together and inspecting it together. You can negotiate things while you're walking, and hopefully that leads to a quicker resolution. Once the carrier approves the estimate and we agree with the numbers, the work can actually begin. And the work is directly scheduled through ACAM, through Brian, through Matt, and the managers at the properties with the shareholders. With the proceeds contract, like we said, it's signed, and then it's our job to submit that on your behalf, on the building's behalf, to the carrier. And as I spoke about before, if you do have any upgrades or adjustments you want in your apartment, we have a few going on right now where they said my apartment was destroyed by a fire. So you know what, I might as well put in new floors and new ceiling and some nice lights. And we're totally amenable to do that. And our costs are normally way less than a typical contractor coming in because we're already working in the building.
Can I ask well, I guess we can ask what the role is of ACAM, but also just what type of emergency is worse? I mean, it sounds like there's certain things where you might overlook it, like a leak. You know, we're like, oh, it's just a running faucet, it's not a big deal, but that might actually be more dangerous to the building's well-being than a small fire. So can you kind of touch upon that?
I would report everything, like Phil said. Even if you're just putting your carrier on notice, it's really important, because later on, if it does spread, like I said, water finds its way and travels. And we just had a loss where they said, oh no, it's only 2 apartments. And thank God they told their insurance, because we got a call 3 days later, okay, there's 3 more apartments affected. So in that case, it's important.
And it also depends on your building type. How much staff do you have? Do you have an on-site resident manager? If you don't have an on-site resident manager, we strongly recommend, you call a company like the Strongwater Group. Let's get someone out there who has the expertise in what's needed, and say, hey, maybe our services actually aren't needed, or we're going to lend you just a few fans for a few days. It really depends on your type of building. And before Brian describes in detail what we do, we should really add, your resident manager tends to be the initial star of the show. They know where valves are. They know who the residents are. They know what everyone's concerns are and how the building operates. And they tend to be a leader in who we work with on this tremendously, from walkthroughs, initial response, the incident report, even everything. So, we're particularly thankful for their efforts and work, when these occur.
Well, what about for
Brian,
what about buildings that don't have resident managers or in super? Like, what do the just general buildings do in that case?
I can answer that question.
So-
I've been in
Yes.
I've actually been in those situations before where there's not an on-site super who lives on the building, and we've been called out to the building, and there's a lot of moving going on. There's a lot of different things that have to happen. There's a lot of things that might need to occur to stop the situation. A leak coming from the roof area going down. The first item is to get whatever staff is at the building, it is available, or whatever professionals you have called out, and that would be one of the first points we're going to talk about, is what kind of emergency is it, and how do we address that emergency, and how do we stop the problem immediately? That's the first step. If you don't have an on-site superintendent, that's why our organization, PMG, would be on-site immediately to help with this process, and having the professionals hitting the valves, making sure that areas are being kind of quarantined so that people aren't going into and disturbing a site. Because one of the items that could become an issue for the claim is if people start touching things and removing things and trying to start this cleanup process before anything's been documented. So long story short, if you don't have an on-site super or resident manager, that's what ACAM's here to do. ACAM is here to help you through this process, and we're 24/7 ourselves. We get the call, we're on site immediately when it's called for. If there's an emergency that requires a body to be there, we're there immediately. And we have a team that's been put in place, and the team we work with is excellent, and we have a lot of good guys who are very eager to make sure that our clients are properly addressed.
Mm-hmm. And just to reiterate that, Andy Light, the VP of Operations at ACAM, really oversees this program, and for any event that's, middle of the night, weekends, whatever it may be, someone from ACAM will be there to coordinate the response and, the professionals needed.
Great. All
Well,
right.
If
now
we can just go
everyone's
back,
favorite.
I'm sorry, if we could
Sure.
if we could just go back to that slide for just one moment. One of the things, Brian, if you could just touch upon, communication and knowing like when the site, is okay, and just allowing the residents and the board to know that.
So after the whole identifying, addressing, and getting the problem under control, and we're in a place where the immediate triage of the situation has been kind of contained, and we know that we're not going to have water leaking, and to the best of our ability at that moment, because as Alexis has alluded to, you might have water that's still retaining in the walls, and it might take time to show itself. When we're at the point where we're confident and we've looked at every situation, moisture mapping has occurred for leaks in certain situations, when we know we're confident that the problem has been addressed, notices have already been should have gone out, which is the first thing we do, just to notify all residents of the building of the incident, to let us know if there's any sort of situation in their apartment that might need addressing and documentation. And then realistically, it's the final memo of the night is just to let everyone know that over the next couple of weeks, couple of days, there will be some machines maybe in the hallway, in people's apartments, and we'll be monitoring the situation because one of the services, part of the remediation service is there's follow-up, and the follow-up is really coming in, checking the situation, making sure whatever can be done is done, and part of what we do is to make sure that this is facilitated and done accordingly. We work with the resident managers who, Matt is correct, we can't thank enough for their assistance because no one knows their buildings as best as they do, but we just try to help facilitate the situation so that, the residents are informed, the boards obviously are informed, and just get them to a situation where the problem is completely rectified as soon as possible. They do take time though. That's just something as a caveat. They can take a little bit of time. It's not an overnight thing most of the time, but we do our best to get the building back in shape as quickly as possible.
And that's a good point, Brian. Like, I'm sorry, just a lot of time, the equipment, this remediation equipment is there for a week or longer. We know it's noisy, and if it happens to be in your apartment, like, please keep it plugged in. Can't stress enough how important it is to have this equipment running. We all have calls. Our kids are trying to learn from home. It's, on top of all of that, these situations make things, nearly impossible. But, having that equipment running and operating as it should be is really important too.
Also, sorry, Matt.
Go ahead.
If the power keeps going out or you're having issues keeping the equipment running, it's important to let your resident manager know so they can contact us or the company that's doing it, because we do have ways to fix that and external power sources to bring in and ways to help you to keep the equipment running. But if we're not notified, we can't help.
Got it.
And one of the ways we're able to know things of that nature is, the ACAM person doesn't disappear, as soon as the fire department leaves or the water's turned off. They're there to check moisture reports, check damage, and they're through the process until actually the claim is both approved and the work is even completed. So someone from ACAM, not just your property manager, they'll be there too. They're instrumental as well, just like the resident manager. But for these types of situations, we strongly feel that added support is needed, and thus the reason for an additional person, and particularly from our team.
Yeah, I was going to ask earlier about the communication elements during an active emergency, from a building's perspective. What tools do we use to make sure that residents are removed from the building when they need to be, or, because not every building might use building link. I mean, what are some tools that buildings can implement for safety?
So typically the key for if it's in a major emergency, the staff is very important. They're a critical tool in really getting people informed, especially people who might be in the building. Fire safety plans, things of that nature are incredibly important. When it comes to water remediation and leak situations, it's very important that people, essentially the first thing that's done is typically knocking on doors. That's like, we have to let people know right away. Memos proceed immediately afterwards. However, however the building distributes, the manager, as Matt said, is intricate and is very important in that process. They are going to be the conduit for us to get the information across as clearly as possible to the shareholders, so if they're or owners, so that they know exactly what the next process is. Putting your insurance on notice, making sure that if you see anything, to document it as soon as possible. So this way, again, you have a big part of this is you have the owners and the shareholders have to let us know so that we can help them get to the final resolution of everything.
Right, that makes sense. And then I guess, Matt, is there any specific, or whoever wants to answer, any specific preventative maintenance that can be done that might prevent you from getting to the emergency stage?
Definitely. So that's a great question. So and it's preventative, and also like what to do when the emergency occurs. Like, what is your communication plan? Are we knocking on doors, megaphones? Do we have Building Link? Do we need to use the emergency tool within Building Link and call or text everyone very quickly? The second really important thing to know is, where are your valves? Your resident manager knows where the shutoff valves, but what about on the weekend? What about the overnight staff? And knowing how to shut things down when problems arise. And then additionally, a lot of our buildings, when apartment alterations occur requiring certain upgrades, whether it's branch piping or more water sensors, water alarms, forgive me, or some things you can do. For buildings that use fan coils, annual maintenance, change the filters, clean the coils. There is typically a lot you can do ahead of time,
So have you seen anything? I mean, I guess you wouldn't know because it didn't become an emergency, but is there anything that you've seen a building during an active emergency be very proactive that might have, do you have a story or example where that way it might strike a chord with people in the future? Like, this is something that worked in the timing of the emergency, and it prevented it from getting to the next level.
Fire suppression.
Yes, sir.
Fire suppression systems is a big one in that regard. When you have the proper fire suppression tools in place, especially with the fire, if you have a sprinkler system that's adequately installed and it has the right PSI for the area that it's covering, that's a big deal. And these are the little things that you can be doing. Fire extinguishers in key locations, your motor room, in your basement, these little things, they really help go a long way as an example in that situation.
Yeah. Where are your first aid kits? Do we need a first aid kit? Do we have an AED? If it's a more personal emergency. And then also one thing we see that resident managers are excellent at, they try and move the elevators from the basement to the first or second floor so that they don't get damaged. I cannot stress how important that is.
Can you
particularly in our
I don't
high-rise
know why that
buildings.
would be. Can you tell us a little bit why that
And,
would be?
and typically it's not just to the first or second, depending on where the leak actually does occur. You don't want the elevator below the leak. You want the elevator above the leak, because for a couple of reasons. One, if the elevator is sitting below the leak and water gets into the shaft of the elevator, you're going to fry out all the mechanicals on the top, all the electrical wiring, all the little intricate details that sit on top of the cab. If the elevator is sitting in the basement and water gets to the basement, you're also now going to start, having issues with the bottom, because there's a lot of wiring on the underside of the cab that could get damaged. And these types of repairs can be very expensive. These are the types of repairs that will also knock your elevator out for a couple of weeks if there's certain parts that might not be readily available. I experienced this recently on a building down on the Lower East Side, and it essentially knocked the elevator out for a week because the superintendent, the resident manager, was able to get the elevator up so quickly and get it to a position where it wasn't going to have any water sitting on it for a prolonged amount of time.
And what about fire? Is there a similar way you need to handle the elevator during that time, or?
Elevators should be locked. Typically, the fire department, when they come in, they have a special key for most elevators, and they lock off your elevators. Depending on where the fire is and how, it depends on the layout of your building. Typically, though, all the elevators are shut down in the event of a fire at a building for the pretty obvious reason of if a fire gets into the shaft, you could have a real major issue, safety hazard there.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. And we tend to see like as much damage from the water to put out the fire as from the fire itself. So fires are both fires and water events.
I'm not as familiar with emergency scenarios, so I think this is interesting because it sounds like water damage might be the most damaging to the building. Am I wrong, or is it?
Typically, you always
ranking?
have. Typically, you're usually dealing with water, because if it's a fire, you're getting water at some point. If you could have, and buildings have a lot of different areas where there is water just naturally flowing through the building. And if there is a leak on let's just say a cup link or on a valve, those are pressurized lines, and that's when you start to see, especially on hot water lines. That's a real concern when you have a hot water riser. That's when you could see, steam, and you can start to have concerns about mold growth, because that'll help expedite the process, because hot water is definitely going to move faster than cold water would. Not that cold water can't get to that point, but there's a lot of different factors, like where your piping is running, where you could potentially get leaks. And again, the age of the building can also factor into this, because the design of older buildings, water typically can get to different areas. And if it's older and there's deterioration over time, you could see water getting into areas you would never think that it could get to. It could happen on the other side of the building in one apartment, because there's an avenue which water will travel. So.
Interesting.
And we also recommend that buildings know what equipment you have and know what equipment you need. What is the average size square footage of apartment? Because this equipment is based on square footage. Do I need dehumidifiers? How many should I have based on the number of apartments? These things happen, and we want the staff, and as from training, from employee handbooks, to know what to do, where things are, and also what they shouldn't do. We don't want our employees, our staff, rushing into burning apartments. We are really, want resident managers, to lead their staff in what to do in these situations, with the help of their property managers.
Makes sense. All right, so we've got some good questions. So let's start to do those. If the emergency is really bad and my apartment is uninhabitable, will insurance cover the cost of staying in a hotel?
That's probably best for Phil. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if a unit owner, they can't live in their apartment, must move out for a week, the building's insurance company will not pay for that. The building's insurance company only pays for losses to the building. The unit owner would have to notify their own insurance carrier on that. They typically have a coverage on the homeowner's policy, alternate living spaces. So that's where they would have to go. And that's why we always recommend that the unit owner put their carrier on notice.
Okay, it's good to know. Does wet drywall have to be replaced if remediation is able to start right after the leak is stopped?
I guess I'll take that one. It totally depends on how much water there was, because, and also the temperature outside. There's so many factors. So calling us and having someone come immediately and set up the appropriate equipment is the best way to possibly save some walls. However, there's so many factors. And if you're the apartment below a fire, and like Matt said, where the water damage is often worse than the fire damage because the fire personnel are doing what they have to do by spraying tons of water into the building, it's a lot harder to dry. And if it's just not drying, we monitor every other day. And if the walls just aren't drying, then sometimes they just have to be taken down.
And again, it also depends on the building construction. There's
Correct.
factors of how your buildings, like what kind of setup what your walls look like. Because if your
Yep.
walls are cavities, it can help with the water just going into an area where it doesn't affect the interior finishes of the walls.
Yep.
Okay. What if there's an emergency at a landmark property and new pieces of the exterior need to be replaced? Do they need to be approved by the Landmarks Commission?
Yes, so it's very important that if you're in a landmark building or a landmark district, you let that we get started ASAP. Everything has to go by the landmarks committee at that point. So even if the building just redid the windows, we need to show a sample of the windows and show we're putting the same thing back. And this process can take a long time. So it's really important that, and it's our architect can take care of it and has a lot of experience, but the longer that someone's engaged to start this process, the longer till the reconstruction is completed.
All right, so since you're mentioning timeframes, are there certain timeframes that are put in place to complete the work? And is that included in a proceeds contract?
So we essentially go apartment by apartment. We do not, there's nothing in the proceeds that says work must be finished by XYZ, because it also depends on the insurance company and the carrier and their negotiations. We do work with ACAM to give each shareholder or resident a time frame of when their repairs will be done. So ACAM, I know, works on a schedule, and we tell them, okay, this apartment is flooring, walls, and we give them a timeline of how soon, like 3 weeks, we think the work will be done or whatever, just so they have a good time frame.
Okay, great.
And we try and be as flexible as possible. You know, we know, how difficult these times are. You know, this work does have to get done, but we do try and make it work to the best of our abilities, with the affected resident. It's hard enough, what's happened, and, we try, but again, the work does have to get done at some point.
Right. All right. So if say you live in a complex and there's several buildings in that complex, if there's a certain case, I don't know if this is true, but would there be one deductible for insurance loss if it's multiple buildings? Could that be a case, or would they be deducted individually?
I'll answer that. Typically, the deductible goes by the incident. So if there's one incident, one giant fire that causes damage to multiple buildings in the complex, that there would only be one deductible taken on that.
Interesting. Okay.
And to elaborate further, Elise, like typically a multi building complex is under one entity, and it's that entity that has the policy with the carrier. So the same way if one building needs a roof, that particular building doesn't enter into a unique contract with a roofing contractor. Mm-hmm. The same premise applies here. It's the entity forming the contract, not the individual building or address.
Got it. That makes sense. This, I guess, could be a Strongwater question. Does location matter for you as far as arriving at the scene?
So we have
building is in Midtown, for example. Is that?
So we have equipment and storage facilities in the city, in Westchester, and all over the place. So we also have guys that are on call overnight, and they have Strongwater vans, and their vans are full of equipment. So when they get the emergency call, we dispatch that one van, they show up to the site. If more equipment's necessary, we send another van, or that crew is working on getting the other equipment while the van's already there. So we do keep a few different rental storage facilities to ensure adequate timeframes.
Great. All right. So I think we can just, I'm not seeing any more questions. So the good news is that we can end on our favorite note, which is, do you have any last remaining thoughts on how people can, handle emergencies, or some words of wisdom? Obviously we don't encourage emergencies, but there are ways that we can handle them better and be more proactive. So do each of you want to contribute one little tidbit? Alexis, I'll start with you. You're at the top.
Sure. I think the best thing I can give a building is think and act fast. Get your resident manager trained so they're ready to respond. And the quicker you get EMS in there to clean up, the better for everyone.
Great. And then Brian?
I would just say, in the moment, patience and calmness really help the situation move quickly. So the more patient you are, the quicker things will go, and the more patient you are, the faster, even faster they will go.
Great. And Philip?
The only suggestion I'd have, which I'd mentioned, have the claim submitted immediately, even if you have minor information on it. Typically, the three most important items is the data loss, the location of the building, and a brief description of what happened. You have that information, we can get it to the carrier right away.
Great. And Matt, not last, but, well, you are last, but not least. No words? You're done? Well, I certainly don't have.
I'm sorry, could you, I think I lost you for a moment there. Apologize, but have a plan. Check the plan annually, enhance it, understand what you need to do, rely on your resident manager when these items occur, or building expert who really knows the building, and protect your most expensive equipment as these things occur, such as elevators. Maybe we put equipment in your boiler room, and just protect the most expensive things initially.
Great. That's a good tip. All right, guys, thank you so much for your time. Alexis,
Thank you.
Philip, Brian, and Matt, we really appreciate everything that you've shared with us today. We encourage all of you who watched today, please reach out to each one of us with questions. I encourage you, the top, not so much the bottom. No, but we're always here to answer any questions that you have. We encourage questions, and we really appreciate your time. So be safe out there. I send out good vibes for no emergencies, and that you're in good care if you do, God forbid, happen. So thank you so much. Have a great day, and hope to see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.